The lipstick smear on Brian's collar was uncomfortably obvious. I'd bought him clean white shirts for years, but the crimson stain had taunted me. With shaky hands, I picked up the cloth, the unusual perfume overwhelming my senses. "Tina, have you seen my blue tie from our bedroom?" It was Brian's voice calling from across the room. I hurriedly put the clothes back in the basket, my heart pounding. I went into our room and said, "Just a moment," trying not to stutter. Brian was fiddling with his cufflinks, his back to me. "It's you. Would you kindly help me with this?" "I need to arrive early for a meeting," he inquired. I approached him and reached out for his cufflinks out of instinct. Another late night at the office. Unable to contain the tension in my voice, I questioned. Brian had a blank expression on his face. "As you are aware, Tina, all of my time is being consumed by the Johnson account." "Is that so?" I whispered as I gave him his tie. He raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" I pretended to laugh. "Not a thing. Just because lately you've been working a lot." Brian glanced at his phone as soon as he felt it vibrating, a small smile appearing on his lips. "I must depart. Don't wait up for me, please." As soon as he sprinted out the door, a knot in my stomach began to form. I had already seen Brian's odd conduct, including his late hours, his sneaky phone glances, and the emotional distance between us. All the signs were pointing to something I was afraid to look at. I grabbed my phone and called Harriet. The third ring was her answer. She said, "Tina, is everything okay?" I said, trembling, "I need to talk. Could we grab coffee together?" An hour later, I was sitting across from Harriet at our favorite cafe. I expressed all my uncertainties to her, and she listened carefully while wearing a worried look. Squeezing my hand across the table, she whispered, "Tina, honey, I hate to say this, but it sounds like Brian might be, well, you know." I nodded, tears starting to well up in my eyes. "I think he's having an affair." Harriet's eyes widened. "Have you questioned him?" I gave a headshake. "I'm not sure how. What happens if I'm not correct? What if all I'm worried about is paranoia?" "You require proof," Harriet said adamantly. "Have you considered hiring a private detective?" I had thought about it, but after hearing Harriet suggest it, it made more sense. "I'm not sure if I could pull that off," I said. "You should know the truth, Tina. You need to know whether Brian is being unfaithful." My mind was aflutter as we left the cafe. It felt worse to live in perpetual doubt than to hire a spy to watch my husband. I waited for Brian to come home that evening. Sitting by ourselves in our living room, the house felt even more empty than it had before, the ghosts of happier times haunting us. The front door finally opened, and I braced myself for the conversation that ensued. Brian came in, his tie loose, looking exhausted but oddly optimistic. "Hey, are you still awake?" he said. I took a deep breath. "Brian, we need to talk." His mouth twitched as he paused. "What's wrong? Are you having an affair?" The words began to pour before I could stop them. Brian's face became blank, then twisted into a mask of rage. "What? How could you possibly think that? You're never home. You're always on your phone. And today, I found—" "Found what?" he interrupted in a stern tone. I hesitated, unsure. "Not a thing. Simply put, we haven't been together in a while." Even as Brian's expression softened, his eyes remained cautious. "Work is keeping me busy, Tina. You're having delusions." I felt nervous, as though this was just the beginning of a long, painful trip. He was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts, but I knew there was truth out there, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to get it. I held the thick business card, gazing at the words, Charlotte Wilson, Private Investigator. I never imagined that I would be the sort of woman to pay someone to spy on her husband, yet here I was, about to do exactly that. Sitting in a darkly lit office, Charlotte said in a firm but gentle manner, Mrs. Thompson, could you tell me anything about your husband's routine? I inhaled deeply. He typically returns from work after 9 p.m. Having left at approximately 7:30 a.m., he has been traveling for work more frequently than normal lately. Charlotte nodded, taking notes. Any particular days or patterns to these trips? They're usually on the weekends, I responded, realizing once more how true that was. He says it's to avoid disrupting the work week. I see, Charlotte responded, maintaining a bland attitude. And you suspect he's seeing someone else? I nodded, unable to get the knot in my throat to go away. Yes. All right, Mrs. Thompson. Tomorrow I will begin my observation. A current picture of your spouse and any other details you feel would be pertinent are required. I felt a wave of anxiety and relief as I walked out of Charlotte's office. At last, I was taking action. But was I prepared for the reality? The following few days were complicated. Every time my phone rang, I couldn't help but jump, thinking Charlotte had something new to share. Brian carried on with his routine as if nothing were wrong, unaware of my inner agony. On Friday night, when Brian was getting ready for another work trip, my phone rang. It was Charlotte. Mrs. Thompson, let me give you some facts. In an hour, may we meet in my office? My heart pounded. Yes, I'll be there. Brian raised his head from his bag. Everything okay? I feigned a laugh. Just Harriet. Girls' night plans. He nodded. Enjoy yourselves. See you on Sunday evening. An hour later, with my hands trembling, I sat across from Charlotte as she put a manila package on the desk. Charlotte remarked softly, Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry to say that your assumptions were correct. I willed myself not to cry and closed my eyes. Tell me everything. Charlotte unfolded the envelope and fanned out the pictures. She pointed to a stunning blonde in her early 30s. Your husband has been meeting this woman on a regular basis. They've been seen entering this hotel multiple times this week. I was lost in thought as I gazed at the pictures. My 10-year spouse, Brian, was standing there with his arm around a woman I had never seen before. They were kissing, stroking, and laughing. Do you know who she is? I asked, my voice hardly audible above a whisper. Charlotte gave a nod. Lisa, she's employed by your husband's company, based on my observations, a junior partner. Now it all made sense. The late nights, the weekend business excursions. There's more. Charlotte paused before continuing. This weekend, they won't be in the city. This morning, they headed upstate to a cabin resort. It was as though I had taken a hit to the belly. I'm grateful, Charlotte. I had to leave. The envelope containing the damning proof rested on the passenger seat like a ticking time bomb as I drove home in a fog. I recognized the automobile parked in front of me as I came into our driveway. Brian's mother, Amanda. Great, just what I needed. I forced a grin onto my face and went inside, where I saw Amanda enjoying a glass of wine by herself in the kitchen. Tina, my dear, she said with too much joy, while Brian is away, I thought I would stop by to keep you company. How amazing is it that he's working so hard? I became quite angry. Was she aware? Was she stepping in for him? Despite my beating heart, I responded calmly. Actually, Amanda, I know exactly what kind of work Brian's doing this weekend. Amanda smiled nervously. What do you mean? I unfolded the pictures on the kitchen counter, placing them in front of her. Care to explain this? Upon seeing the proof of her son's adultery, Amanda's expression went pale. Her look shifted from shock and disappointment to something more calculating. "Oh, Tina," she said, her tone brimming with false pity. "You're aware of how these things work. Perhaps if you had paid closer attention." I stared at her, my incredulity turning to rage. It was almost as if she had known all along. Amanda's betrayal went further than I could have ever anticipated. She kept offering explanations, but I was up against not just my spouse, but his entire family. The weight of Amanda's cooperation and Brian's treachery kept me awake for days. I was scarcely able to focus on anything beyond the broken parts of my life while going through the motions at work. A buzz on my phone interrupted my thoughts. Harriet's name flickered on the screen. Her voice, tinted with something I couldn't quite place, was frantic. "Tina, you need to get down here now." "Harriet, what's going on?" "I'm at Sheep Pierre, you know, that fancy French place downtown." Her voice trailed to a whisper. "Tina, this is Brian." The globe swung in one direction. "What? He's supposed to be in Chicago for a business trip." "Well, unless Chicago moved to our local bistro," he lied again. Anger and worry mingled in Harriet's tone. "Do you want me to confront them?" "No," I blurted out. "Just keep an eye on them. I'm heading there now." With my head racing, I reached for my keys. This was my chance to confront Brian and his mistress face to face. As I drove, I attempted to slow my pounding heart, but the betrayal was still raw. The sight of Sheep Pierre appeared refined and orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos within me. I pulled up next to Harriet's car after spying it. She stood waiting outside, a worried mask covering her face. "They're still in there," she said, holding my hand tightly. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I steeled myself and nodded. I need to see it with my own eyes. As we walked into the restaurant, the subdued lighting and soothing music mocked the sight that was about to unfold. Then I saw them, Brian and Lisa, sitting at a table in the corner, their heads pressed close together as they laughed deeply. Their fingers entwined. His hand fell onto hers. I felt sick to my stomach. Harriet said, "Tina, wait," but I had already started to move. My heart was racing so hard I was certain they could hear it as I walked up to their table. Brian glanced up at me, a frozen smile spreading across his face. "Tina," he said, yanking his hand away from Lisa as fear flashed in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" With a calm voice, I responded, "I could ask you the same thing. Oddly enough, this doesn't look anything like Chicago." Lisa's face lit up with recognition as she glanced between us. "Brian, is this your wife?" Brian murmured, "Ex-wife soon enough," then winced as he realized what he'd said. I had a slap-like feeling. Is that accurate? Furthermore, when precisely were you going to inform me of this divorce? As others in the restaurant stared, the place fell silent. Brian got up, attempting to nudge me away from the table. "Let's not do this here, Tina. We can talk at home." I recoiled from his touch. "No, Brian. Let's get started right now. How long has this been going on? How much longer have you been deceiving me?" Lisa got up to get her handbag. "I think I should go." "Oh no," I turned to face her. "You two have a role in this. Did he lie to you about our separation, or did you know he was married? At least she could have looked embarrassed. He said things were complicated. I gave a sour laugh. Complex? That's one interpretation of it. Brian moved to get in our way. Tina, please. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene. I raised my voice. You've been having an affair, lying about it for months, and I'm the one making a scene. Harriet materialized by my side, encircling my shoulders with her arm. Leave, Tina, please. Come on, they're not worth it. I took one final look around as she escorted me out of sight. Brian, don't bother returning home. When Amanda arrives, your belongings will be packed and prepared. She will be overjoyed to see you again, I'm sure. Brian and Lisa were left startled into silence as we left the restaurant. I felt a peculiar mixture of anguish and comfort when the cold night air touched my face. At least there were no longer any falsehoods. The truth was out, bare and nasty. Harriet gave me a strong embrace. Oh, Tina, I'm so sorry. What will you do now? I inhaled deeply, my thoughts already buzzing with plans. I'm fighting back now. They think they can ignore me. They don't know who they're dealing with. A new resolve was rising within me. As we left Sheep Pierre, I knew this was only the start of my battle for justice and dignity. It wasn't the end. I woke the morning after the restaurant altercation with a renewed sense of resolve. Packing Brian's things had taken almost the entire night, each item serving as a somber reminder of our shared past. Amanda was the next person I had to deal with. My hands gripped the driving wheel, so hard that my knuckles turned white as I drove to her expansive suburban home. I noticed her peeking out from behind lace curtains as I parked in her driveway. I was here, and she understood why. Before I could even knock, Amanda answered the door with a foamy look of concern on her face. Oh, Tina. How unexpected. My darling, is everything in order? I shoved past her and into the lobby. Stop acting, Amanda. I'm here, and we both know why. With a groan, she shut the door. I suppose you've spoken to Brian? Yes, I said, and uncovered his affair. Caught him red-handed. Indeed, I turned to face her, rage building inside me, but my voice remained calm. However, isn't that not even the worst aspect? You were aware. You have always known. Amanda's mask briefly faltered before she regained her composure. You have to understand, Tina. Brian wasn't happy, and that validates cheating. I cut her off. That makes it okay for him to lie to me? To make a fool of me? She appeared irritated. Oh, just tone it down. In marriages, these things happen. Had you given Brian's needs more consideration? Don't even try to put this on me, I interrupted. I threw everything into this union. I supported Brian's career. This is how I get compensated for being there for him through it all. Amanda's gaze grew strained. Tina, what exactly are you wanting? Cash. I can guarantee that Brian's attorneys will ensure that you receive no more money than your due. Her remark struck me sharply. Is that your understanding of the situation? Cash? Isn't it always? She grinned. You're not growing any younger, darling. Face it. Brian is making a move. Perhaps it's time for you to follow suit. I was struck by a fury I had never felt before. Amanda, you truly are a piece of work. You're supporting a cheater that you raised. What kind of mother acts like that? She fired back, the kind who wants her son to be happy. Lisa understands Brian's goals. She supports him in ways you never could. She's half his age and his subordinate at work. I said, but I'm sure that has absolutely nothing to do with it. Amanda dismissively waved her hand. The fact is that you've lost, Tina. Brian will obtain the divorce he desires. Why don't you just sign the documents to avoid the humiliation of a prolonged court battle? I stared at her. Then it dawned on me. Papers. Which documents? Amanda's expression briefly flashed alarm before her features straightened. Oh, that. Brian didn't bring it up. He has begun the process already. The paperwork should be here any day soon. They had this whole thing arranged. They were planning to remove me completely from the picture. As I was in agony over Brian's treachery, Amanda's icy tone brought me back to reality. I believe it's time for you to go, Tina. There's nothing left to discuss. I experienced an odd sense of peacefulness as she led the way to the door. Amanda, you're correct. There's nothing else to talk about. Yet this is not the end, not in the slightest. I left her house with a racing mind. They believed they had me trapped, that I would submit to their superiority. They didn't know who they were dealing with. As I drove home, I resolved to not only fight this divorce, but to ensure that Brian and Amanda would never again try to control me. It was time to prove my true abilities. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Hi, are you Charlotte Donovan? Tina Thompson here. I need your assistance. This goes beyond merely obtaining proof. There will be a battle. The manila envelope lay on my kitchen table for hours, and I had been gazing at it without the courage to open it. My worst suspicions were confirmed by the return address. Brian's attorney's office. I eventually tore it open with shaky hands. Divorce papers, as Amanda had told me. I quickly perused the legalese, growing more irate with each passing word. Brian claimed irreconcilable differences in his request for a no-fault divorce, but the settlement proposal made my anger boil. He was offering me a pitiful amount in alimony and wanted the house and most of our joint assets. It was as though my sacrifice for his career and our 15 years of marriage meant nothing. Brian texted me as my phone chimed, asking if I had received the documents. Let's simplify this for our mutual benefit. Simply sign the documents. I hurled the phone into the room, watching with satisfaction as it hit the wall with a crash. Who finds this easy? Not me. The doorbell startled me out of my wrath. When I opened it, Amanda was standing there with a condescending smile on her face. Tina, my dear, she mused. I wanted to check in with you to see how you were doing. Have you had an opportunity to review the documents? I moved aside to let her in. Yes, I have indeed looked at them. Your son's attempt to leave his wife penniless must make you incredibly pleased. Amanda's smile persisted. Tina, please stop being so dramatic. Considering the situation, Brian is making you a reasonable offer. Fair? I gave a sour laugh. He wants to steal all that the two of us have achieved and leave me empty-handed. Is that equitable? She sighed, like she was giving a toddler instructions. Tina, you have to accept the truth. Brian has moved on. Fighting this will just lead to more chaos. Why don't you simply sign the documents and begin again? I was staring at her when it dawned on me. It was your idea after all. You subjected Brian to this. Amanda's expression briefly flickered between remorse and indignation before she regained her composure. All I did was counsel Brian about what's best for his future. And to be honest, what's best for you as well. Tina, you're not growing any younger. You won't benefit from a protracted divorce. Her remarks struck me sharply. Although I had always known Amanda disliked me, I was unaware of the extent of her contempt. Leave, I murmured in a low, threatening voice. Excuse me. Get out of my house. I approached the door and held it open. You can also let Brian know that he has a battle if he wants one. I refuse to sign those documents. Not today. Not ever. Amanda's kind exterior gave way. Tina, don't be a fool. This is not something you can win. The greatest attorneys money can buy are Brian's. You will have nothing in the end. I met her stare and remained firm. Maybe, but I'll make sure he loses just as much in the process. I slammed the door behind Amanda as she rushed out. My heart was racing. I rested against the door, attempting to gather my thoughts. What had I just done? Was I really going to take on Brian and his formidable legal team? I glanced at the divorce documents resting on the table. Full of renewed resolve, I went over and ripped them to pieces. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number. Remarkably, it was undamaged from its earlier journey. It's me, Harriet. I need your assistance. Do you still keep in touch with the DA's office contact? I believe it's time to investigate some of Brian's suspicious accounting methods from his job. I experienced an odd combination of excitement and terror as I hung up. My time as the victim was over. I was going to show Brian and Amanda that I could play dirty too, if that was their thing. I might have lost my spouse, but I wouldn't trade my honor or a fair portion of our joint efforts. The battle had begun, and I planned to prevail. In the courtroom, tension was palpable as I sat next to my attorney, Sarah, watching Brian and his team enter. Amanda trailed behind, wearing a smug, confident look. Despite my rumbling stomach, I forced myself to sit up straight. This was it, the real deal. The bailiff yelled, "All rise," as the judge walked in. I felt like David going up against Goliath as the proceedings started. When Brian's attorney took the stand, dressed like a shark in a fancy suit, he painted me as a money-hungry con artist looking to take advantage of Brian's success. As I listened to the lies, my knuckles turned white, clutching the edge of the table. Next, it was our moment. Sarah got up and spoke in a clear, firm voice. "Your Honor, we have proof that Mr. Thompson has been underreporting his income and concealing assets for years." As Sarah showed the judge the documentation we had discovered, bank statements, offshore accounts, and proof of creative bookkeeping at his company, a murmur went through the room. I noticed Brian's face growing paler. Leaning forward, Amanda angrily whispered to Brian's attorney. "Moreover," Sarah continued, "we have reason to believe that Mr. Thompson violated company policy by having an affair with his colleague, Lisa Carter, while she was under his supervision, potentially putting the firm at risk of a sexual harassment lawsuit." In the rear of the courtroom, I saw Lisa shift uneasily. Although Brian's attorney immediately rose to object, the judge overruled him. I saw a ray of hope as Sarah presented our case. When Brian's attorney asked for a break and gathered with Brian and Amanda in a courtroom corner, we appeared to have them under control. Upon our reunion, Brian's attorney approached the bench. "Your Honor, my client would like to propose a settlement in light of this new information." As I listened to the terms, my heart raced. While it didn't include all we had requested, it was still significantly superior to Brian's first proposal, which included a just asset distribution, a sizable alimony payment, and most importantly, the clearing of my name of any wrongdoing. The judge turned to face me. "Do you accept these terms, Mrs. Thompson?" I looked at Sarah, and she nodded slightly. We couldn't have asked for more. "Yes, I do, Your Honor." Upon the judge's official declaration, I experienced a release of burden. I had won, and it was over. Amanda cornered me outside the courtroom. "You think you're winning?" she growled. "Tina, this isn't finished. You've made everything terrible." I met her stare and remained firm. "No, Amanda. When you decided to turn on me, you and Brian destroyed everything. I simply refused to fall prey to fate." She rushed out, and I saw Brian coming. He seemed deflated, far unlike the self-assured man who had attempted to intimidate me into submitting. He began, but I raised a hand instead. "Brian, save it. This is it for us." With my head held high, I turned and left. It seemed like I could breathe freely for the first time in months as I pushed past the courthouse doors and into the brilliant sunlight. Harriet sent me a text that made my phone buzz. "How did it go?" "It's over," I replied, grinning. I triumphed. As I waited for a cab, it occurred to me that this was not just the end of my marriage, but also the start of something new. I had defended my rights, overcome insurmountable obstacles, and come out on top. I paused when the cabbie inquired where to go after it arrived. Realizing that my former existence was now behind me, I said, "Take me to a real estate agent. I feel like I should find a new place to live." I turned away from the courthouse as the taxi left. For the first time in a long time, I was eager to see what was ahead in the future. I entered my new flat after turning the key in the lock and inhaled the aroma of freshly painted walls and opportunity. I was at last prepared to begin my new life, having finalized my divorce 3 months prior. After placing the final box, I looked around the room. Although it was smaller than the house Brian and I had shared, it was all mine. "Housewarming party tonight." Read the text from Harriet that buzzed across my phone. "Me and the girls would like to celebrate." I quickly replied back, "Yes," with a smile. Having something to look forward to felt fantastic. My thoughts strayed to the recent month's changes. As I was unpacking, I'd pushed myself into my work and gotten the promotion I deserved. This property, in the middle of the city and only a short walk from my office, was affordable for me because of the additional income and alimony. My thoughts were interrupted when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, a delivery man with a big bunch of flowers was inside. "Tina Thompson?" was his question. Perplexed as to who could be giving me flowers, I nodded. My blood raced cold as I read the card. "Congrats on your new location. We ought to have a conversation. Brian." I placed the flowers on the counter, my hands shaking. How could he know my residence? And why was he contacting me now? My phone rang before I had time to gather my thoughts. The number was not known to me. "Hey," I replied with caution. "Lisa," was the tremulous voice on the other end. The shock nearly caused me to drop the phone. "Lisa, what are your desires?" Her voice wavered. "I require your assistance. It has to do with Brian. Things are now more difficult." My thoughts were racing. How are we going to meet? Please don't talk to me about this on the phone. I agreed to meet her in an hour at a neighboring cafe. Against my better judgment, I was tense as I made my way there. What possible desire could Lisa have? Was this a trap of some sort? She was seated at a corner table and didn't resemble the assured woman I had seen in court. Her hands fidgeted with a napkin, and her eyes were ringed with red. As soon as I sat down, she remarked, "Tina, thank you for coming. Let's get right to it. What's going on, Lisa?" She inhaled deeply. "Brian isn't who we believed him to be. The inventive bookkeeping you found is only the beginning. He is attempting to blame everything on me, even though he is deeply involved in fraud." Stunned, I gazed at her. "What are you saying?" "He made me feel like the fall guy. An inquiry has been conducted, and all the data suggests me, Tina. Though it was him. He was always the one." My thoughts raced. Although I wanted to write her narrative off as just another deception, There was true terror in her eyes. Why are you revealing this to me? Because only you defeated him by standing up to him, Tina. I need you to help. I have proof that could prove Brian's guilt and clear my name. But I can't use it without taking a huge risk. My only hope is in you. My phone buzzed again while she was speaking. Brian texted again, saying, Tina, we really need to talk. It must be done immediately. I glanced at my phone, then back up at Lisa. It seemed as though the life I had been reconstructing was collapsing all around me. Lisa was asking me to help her while Brian tried to wiggle his way back in. I believed I had escaped, but I was trapped during a storm. Lisa's voice pierced my thoughts. Tina, will you help me? My mind was racing. When I met her eyes, everything could alter once more with this choice. My calm life, which I had been creating, was going to be upended no matter what I decided. As I opened my mouth to reply, I wondered if I was prepared to face the storm again. The loud ringing of my phone broke the silence in my apartment. The name Amanda appeared on the screen. After hesitating, I responded. Tina, it's Amanda, she cried in a distressed tone. I require your assistance. It's just Brian and Lisa. Everything is crumbling. I breathed deeply and closed my eyes. Amanda, given everything you've done, why should I assist you? Because you're better than us, she mumbled, stuttering. Tina, please. I had mistrusted you. We were all of us. Against my better judgment, I met her at a nearby park. From her seat on the bench, Amanda appeared small. She was not at all like the assertive woman who had tried to scare me. Amanda, what's going on? I questioned as I took a seat close to her. Her crimson-rimmed eyes shifted to look at me. Brian and Lisa have embezzled millions of company funds. I thought I was protecting my son, even though I've been helping a criminal. My mind was whirling, attempting to process all Lisa had shared with me. And they're betraying each other now. Amanda nodded. Lisa came to me with evidence that implicated Brian in an effort to broker a compromise. But if she speaks, Brian is threatening to expose her role. I don't know what to do because they're ruining each other. I sat back, dumbfounded by the irony. The two people who had collaborated to destroy my life were now destroying each other. I asked, why do you come to me? Because you're the only one who saw through their lies, Amanda retorted. You did the right thing, even when it seemed impossible. I like that about you, Tina, even though I've never spoken to you. Her comment struck a chord with me. After all the pain and betrayal, here was Amanda, begging for my help. What am I supposed to do? She pleaded, help me make this right, when I asked. In the district attorney's office, you know people, to ensure that they both receive justice, you don't have to ruin the company and every employee. I stood up and began to pace, considering my options. If I looked aside and let Brian and Lisa wreck each other, that would be the perfect way to exact revenge. But when I looked up at Amanda, I realized I no longer want revenge. At last, I answered, all right, I'll help. But not for Brian or Lisa, though. In the unlikely event that everything goes wrong, innocent individuals may lose their jobs. A sigh of relief washed over Amanda. Thank you, Tina. I know I'm not deserving of your kindness. You're right, you don't, I said with firmness. But in this instance, doing the right thing takes precedence over deserving. Over the next 2 weeks, I collaborated with my contacts at the DA's office, utilizing the evidence Amanda had gathered. The strategy was meticulous, balancing the pursuit of justice with minimizing collateral damage. In the end, Lisa and Brian were placed under arrest. The business survived, albeit with much trepidation. I watched the news article regarding their arrests with a strange sense of closure. A soft sense of calm began to replace the long-stolen bitterness and wrath. Or perhaps it was just the relief that I had acted morally and stood above their narrow-mindedness. Amanda called me one last time, her voice stifled with grief. "You have my deepest appreciation, Tina. Sincerely, I apologize for how I handled you. I understand it's insufficient. You are an amazing woman." I was surprised to find that when I said, "Thank you, Amanda," I genuinely meant it. Take care of yourself. After hanging up, I looked about my apartment, taking in the people I had built, the job I had grown, and the life I had created. I had worked hard and deserved everything. I picked up a framed photo of myself, proving that I had recently attended a business function and earned a leadership award. I was no longer only the victim or Brian's ex-wife. Rather, I was a strong, independent woman who had persevered through adversity to grow into a more resilient person. I was excited about what was ahead as the sun sank outside my window, casting a warm glow over the city. I was ready to deal with whatever was coming up on my own.